Hi, this is Greg Johnson with Blue Book Services. I'm joined today by Mark Campbell, who's President and CEO of ProduceIQ. ProduceIQ provides us with market analysis every Monday morning on commodity prices and trends. But today we're going to talk about a little bit broader picture, and that is how we're seeing inflation and labor problems. Mark, you and I sat right next to each other at the PMA Food Service this summer, and we talked about this and what we were seeing in real time. What are you seeing in your ProduceIQ capacity as far as really what's going on this fall with as far as, say, labor restriction or constriction?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Greg. Every week when we report the market data, much of what we're seeing is driven by weather and sort of supply, transitions in harvest crops, and those are largely affecting the spot markets. And we are seeing more inflation right now in the last weeks. You've been seeing record-breaking highs as an industry-wide. I think that's generally from weather-driven causes, though even at the farm level, everybody's been impacted by what you just mentioned, labor. They're impacted from planting, harvesting, the packing houses, all the way through to local distribution. And anecdotally, since we had the United Fresh conference in Washington, D.C., the number one topic that we spoke to our politicians about was labor. And that was the number one theme from the various business owners there. And I heard stories of business owners who had increased truck driver wages to $25, but still were not able to attract additional drivers. And I've recently spoken to several business owners of distributors who are actually in the process of firing customers just because they can't handle it, the deliveries. And so they hadn't seen that happen in 40 years where they didn't have enough labor to deliver to good business. So it's pretty dramatic impact.
What would you say the trickle-down effect of that would be? Basically, people firing customers, which means they can raise rates to their current customers without any repercussions.
Yeah, I think it impacts costs across the board. Just as you said, those customers that are still getting served are realizing they could get fired and are willing to pay more. And the customers, who get dropped are scrambling to find other resources, and they themselves are struggling with their own labor issues, whether it's a restaurant or another food service or retail operation, and they have to deal with their employees being taken by the next restaurant who's short of labor and such.
Well, that brings us to our next topic, and it's interesting. We look at this from more of a broad perspective on how it's affecting the whole industry, but I happen to know that you are also a small business owner. You own a restaurant in Florida, and I would imagine that you have a personal experience with some of these challenges.
Yes, I do have a small seafood restaurant near Jupiter, Florida. So if you're over there, it's Hog Snappers, and we've been very fortunate, in the demographic of where we are, that it's quite busy and it's an affluent area. We have a little over 50 employees, which keeps us hopping. And we've certainly continued to raise wages internally, just more so to prevent, to keep employees happy and morale and to stay with the market as it's trending. Florida is also a state that's on the way to a $15 minimum wage, which is a major impact for front of the house employees. So about half your employees, our employees, are in the front versus in the kitchen, and typically the front of the house employees are served even below what's known as the minimum wage, right? Because they get what's called a tip credit. And in our area, front of the house employees are paid pretty generously by the public through tips. And now we're seeing a pretty significant impact through payroll by that annual price increases towards a $15 minimum wage. So we expect in Florida restaurants to see less front of the house employees, more technology, more table side tablets and those types of things, and continued change over the next 5 years.
Well, in addition to labor, I know that just cost of goods and the cost of food has gone up. In the produce world, we certainly see our level of inflation, but you also serve meat and seafood. What are you seeing as far as that and how that compares to produce?
Yeah, we've found more inflation in the proteins, particularly some specialty items. Lobster and crab are the most extreme examples in my little world, where lobster went from say $22 to $50, and crab went from $16 to $55, and has persisted at those high rates for extended period of time, maybe four months plus. So in comparison, when you're paying those types of rates per pound, and you look at your total plate cost, the produce actually is a fairly small part of it. And so in the produce world, we like to think about produce is the center of our world, so it's the most important thing. But to the customer there, the chef, it might be 10 or 15% of his plate cost, depending on the type of restaurant.
Well, sure, I think we can understand. Most of us who work in the produce industry are not vegetarians. We still appreciate meat in the diet. So overall, though, would you say a business is pretty strong when it comes to your restaurant business?
Yeah, I think that the survivors are doing really well. There's a lack of seats available in the area because of reduced competition. And so those restaurants that have higher ratings and have a stronger customer base are survivors, and those that were weaker are going by the wayside. And so that helps those who are doing well even further.
Yeah, I'm sure the fact that you're in Florida probably helps a little too, as opposed to someone who might be in downtown Chicago.
Yeah, Floridians appreciate our freedom. We've been without really COVID and mask mandates for more than a year now. And so the state is growing in large influx. And my area of Florida, largely dominated by New Yorkers in the Northeast moving here, and they're welcome. So keep on coming.
Well, sure, it's easy to say when you're selling food to them. All right, well, Mark, we appreciate your perspective on both broader picture and your own little anecdote from your own world. I hope our audience finds that interesting. I certainly find it interesting myself.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
All right.